A woman is dying in the sand. The man who finds her doesn't know her name, doesn't know where she came from, doesn't know that saving her will cost him everything he's built in 20 years of isolation. The storm is closing in. He has minutes to decide. And once he lifts her into his arms, there's no going back. If you want to see how far a single choice can take two people who were never supposed to meet, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind came first. It always did out here, rolling across the flats like something with teeth, chewing up dust and hurling it at anything fool enough to stand upright. Cole Turner had learned a long time ago not to fight it. You lowered your head, you kept your hat pulled tight, and you waited for it to pass. That was the deal you made with the desert. It didn't care about you, and you didn't pretend it did. He'd been checking fence line when the sky turned that particular shade of yellow-gray that meant trouble. The kind of storm that didn't give warnings, just arrived like a freight train and flattened whatever was in its path. His horse, a roan mare named Dust, had started getting skittish an hour back, ears swiveling, nostrils flaring at something Cole couldn't see yet. Animals knew. They always knew before you did. Easy, he'd muttered, more to himself than the horse. The fence could wait. It had waited 15 years. It could wait another day. He swung up into the saddle and turned Dust back toward the cabin, a squat structure of adobe and weathered wood that sat in a shallow basin 3 miles west. It wasn't much, but it was his. 4 walls, a roof that didn't leak too bad, and enough distance from the nearest town that nobody bothered him. That was all he'd wanted when he'd come out here. That was all he'd needed. The wind picked up as they rode, throwing grit into his eyes, making Dust dance sideways. Cole pulled his bandana up over his nose and mouth, squinting through the haze. Visibility was dropping fast. In another 10 minutes, he wouldn't be able to see his own hand in front of his face. He nudged Dust into a trot, then a canter, leaning low over her neck as the storm closed in around them like a fist. That's when he saw it. A shape, dark against the sand, maybe 30 yards off to the right. At first he thought it was a rock or a dead animal, or one of those weird formations the wind carved out of nothing. But Dust shied hard, nearly throwing him, and Cole's gut clenched in a way that had nothing to do with the storm. He reined her in, staring. The shape moved. Not much, just a shift, a twitch, the kind of motion that said living even when everything else said dead. Hell, Cole said under his breath. He didn't want to stop. The storm was closing in, the cabin was still 2 miles out, and whatever that was, whoever that was, it wasn't his problem. He'd made a life out of not getting involved, not asking questions, not sticking his neck out for anybody. That was the whole point of being out here. But Dust was still skittish, ears pinned back, and Cole found himself turning her toward the shape even as his brain told him not to. 20 yards. 10. 5. It was a person. A woman, half buried in the sand, her clothes torn and filthy, her hair matted with blood and dirt. She was on her side, one arm flung out, the other clutched against her ribs. Her face was turned away, but he could see the rise and fall of her back, shallow, uneven, like every breath was a fight she was losing. Cole sat there for a long moment, the wind screaming around him, Dust stamping and tossing her head. He should leave. He knew he should leave. Whoever she was, whatever had happened to her, it wasn't his business. People didn't end up out here by accident. She'd either done something or had something done to her, and either way, getting involved was a mistake. But his hands were already moving, swinging down from the saddle, boots hitting the sand. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and dropped to one knee beside her, pulling the bandana down from his face. "Hey," he said, loud enough to cut through the wind. "Can you hear me?" No response. He reached out, hesitated, then touched her shoulder. She was burning up, skin hot even through the torn fabric of her shirt. He rolled her onto her back as gently as he could, and her head lolled to the side, eyes closed, lips cracked and bloodless. She wasn't pretty. That wasn't the word. Her face was all hard angles, cheekbones sharp enough to cut, a scar running through one eyebrow. Dirt streaked her skin, and there was a gash above her temple, crusted with blood. But there was something in the set of her jaw, even unconscious, that made him think she'd been fighting right up until the moment she'd collapsed. "Damn it," Cole muttered. He checked her pulse, faint, rapid, barely there. Her breathing was ragged, and when he looked closer, he saw the dark stain spreading across her side, soaking through her shirt. Blood, fresh enough that it hadn't dried yet. The storm hit full force, and the world disappeared into a wall of sand and wind. Cole threw an arm over his face, squinting through the chaos. If he left her here, she'd be dead in an hour. Maybe less. The storm would bury her, and by morning there'd be nothing left but bones. He looked back toward where the cabin should be, invisible now in the storm. Then he looked down at the woman. "This is a bad idea," he said to nobody. Then he slid his arms under her and lifted. She was lighter than he'd expected, all bone and lean muscle, no extra weight to speak of. Her head fell against his shoulder, and he could feel the heat of her fever radiating through his shirt. He turned toward Dust, who was dancing in place, eyes rolling white. "Easy, girl, easy." Getting her into the saddle was a nightmare. The wind kept trying to rip her out of his arms, and Dust wouldn't hold still, but he managed it eventually, hauling himself up behind the woman and pulling her back against his chest. Her head lolled against his collarbone, and he wrapped one arm tight around her waist to keep her from sliding off. "Go," he growled, and Dust lunged forward into the storm. The ride back was hell. Cole couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, couldn't tell if they were even going the right direction. He gave Dust her head and trusted her to find the way, kept his face pressed against the woman's hair to keep the sand out of his eyes. She was shivering now, violent tremors that shook her whole body, and he pulled her closer, trying to share what little warmth he had. Time stopped meaning anything. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. All he knew was the wind, the sand, the weight of the woman in his arms, and the steady rhythm of Dust's hooves beneath them. Then, out of nowhere, the cabin. Dust nearly ran into the side of it, veering at the last second, and Cole caught a glimpse of the door through the haze. He slid down from the saddle, dragging the woman with him, and half carried, half dragged her to the door. It took 3 tries to get it open against the wind, but then they were inside and he kicked it shut behind them. The silence was deafening. Cole stood there for a moment, breathing hard. The woman slumped against him. Then he crossed to the narrow cot in the corner and laid her down as carefully as he could. She didn't stir. He lit the lamp with shaking hands, then turned back to her. In the flickering light, she looked worse. The gash on her head was deeper than he'd thought, and the blood on her side had soaked through her shirt and pooled beneath her. He peeled the fabric back, wincing at what he found, a long, ragged wound just below her ribs, deep enough that he could see muscle and maybe bone. "Hell!" he said again. He'd patched himself up plenty of times over the years, bullet wounds, knife cuts, burns, breaks, but this was different. This was bad. If he didn't stop the bleeding, she'd be dead by morning, and if infection set in, she'd be dead a day or 2 after that. He grabbed the bottle of whiskey from the shelf, tore a strip of cloth from an old shirt, and went to work. The next hours blurred together. He cleaned the wound as best he could, stitching it closed with thread meant for mending saddles, his hand steadier than he'd expected. She didn't wake, didn't make a sound, even when he poured whiskey directly into the gash. That worried him more than the wound itself. People who didn't wake up when you were sewing them back together were people who weren't long for this world. When he was done, he bandaged her side, then moved to the head wound, cleaning it and wrapping it as gently as he could. Her fever was still raging, skin slick with sweat, so he soaked another cloth in water and pressed it to her forehead. Outside, the storm screamed and clawed at the cabin walls. Inside, the lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Cole sat back on his heels, staring at the woman on his cot, and tried to figure out what the hell he'd just done. She could be anybody. A thief, a killer, someone running from the law, or worse, someone the law was running from. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she'd come from, didn't know if saving her life meant signing his own death warrant. But she was breathing. That was something. He stood, poured himself a drink, and downed it in one swallow. Then he pulled a chair over to the cot and sat down, arms crossed, staring at her like she might disappear if he looked away. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered. The woman didn't answer. The storm lasted 2 days. 2 days of wind that shook the cabin walls, sand that seeped in through every crack, and a silence so thick it pressed against Cole's ears like water. He kept the fire going, kept the woman alive, and tried not to think about what he was going to do when she woke up. If she woke up, She didn't move much. Once or twice she shifted, muttering something in a language he didn't recognize, her face twisting in pain. He changed her bandages, forced water between her lips, kept the fever from cooking her alive. It was all he could do. On the second night, the storm finally broke. The wind died, the sand settled, and the world went still. Cole stepped outside and stood in the doorway, breathing in air that didn't taste like grit. The sky was clear, stars scattered across it like thrown salt, and the desert stretched out in every direction, vast and empty and indifferent. He felt that indifference in his chest, cold and familiar. Inside, the woman was still unconscious. He checked her pulse, stronger now, steadier, and allowed himself a small, cautious breath of relief. Maybe she'd make it. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, he'd done what he could. He sat back down in the chair, leaned his head against the wall, and closed his eyes. That's when she woke up. He didn't hear her at first, just felt it, a shift in the air, a change in the room's weight. His eyes snapped open, and there she was, staring at him. Her eyes were dark, not brown, not black, but something in between, sharp and clear and fully awake. She didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at him like she was taking inventory, cataloging every detail. Cole didn't move either. "You're alive," he said finally. She blinked. Once. Slow. "Where am I?" Her voice was rough, scraped raw, but steady. "My cabin, 3 miles west of nowhere." Her gaze flicked around the room, taking in the walls, the door, the single window, then back to him. "Who are you?" "Cole Turner." "Why am I here?" "Found you in the desert. Storm was coming. Didn't seem right to leave you." She studied him for a long moment, and he got the distinct impression she was deciding whether or not to believe him. "How long?" she asked. 2 days. You had a fever. Still do, probably." She started to sit up, and Cole saw the exact moment the pain hit her. Her face went white, jaw clenching, but she didn't make a sound, just pressed a hand to her side and breathed through it. "Easy," Cole said. "You're stitched up, but you lost a lot of blood. You move too fast, you'll tear something." She ignored him, swinging her legs over the side of the cot. Her feet hit the floor and she tried to stand. Her legs gave out immediately. Cole caught her before she hit the ground, one arm around her waist, the other bracing her shoulder. She stiffened, every muscle going tense, and for a second he thought she might swing at him. "Let go," she said, voice low. "You can't stand." "Let go." He did. She swayed, grabbed the edge of the cot, and stayed upright through sheer stubbornness. Cole stepped back, hands raised. "You done proving a point?" he asked. She didn't answer, just stood there, breathing hard, one hand pressed to her side, the other white-knuckled on the cot frame. Her shirt was gone. He'd had to cut it off to get to the wound, and she was wearing one of his old undershirts, too big on her, hanging loose around her shoulders. The bandage around her ribs was already spotted with fresh blood. "You need to sit down," Cole said. "I need to leave. You won't make it a mile. That's not your problem. It is if you die on my land." She turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes, something hard and cold and utterly unafraid. "You should have left me in the desert," she said. "Probably." They stared at each other. Then her legs buckled again, and this time she didn't fight when he caught her. He lowered her back onto the cot, and she sat there, head bowed, breathing ragged. "What's your name?" Cole asked. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. "Ayla." "Where'd you come from, Ayla?" "East." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." "Fair enough." Cole stepped back, crossed to the stove, and ladled water into a cup. He brought it to her, and she took it without looking at him, drank it in slow, careful sips. "You got people looking for you?" he asked. "Maybe." "Good people or bad people?" She smiled just a little. It didn't reach her eyes. "Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does." She handed the cup back to him, and their fingers brushed. Hers were ice cold. "If they find me," she said, "you should run." "That a threat?" "Advice." Cole set the cup down on the table, then turned back to her. She was watching him again, that same sharp, assessing look, like she was trying to figure out what kind of man he was. He wasn't sure he knew the answer to that anymore. "You can stay," he said finally, "until you're strong enough to leave. After that, you do what you want." "Why? Why what? Why help me? You don't know me." "Don't need to. Most people would have left me." "I'm not most people." She studied him for another long moment, then nodded. Just once. "Okay." Cole turned away, busying himself with the fire, trying not to think about the fact that he'd just invited a stranger, a dangerous stranger probably, to stay in his home. He'd spent 20 years keeping people out, keeping the world at arm's length, and now he'd gone and dragged someone in from the storm. Behind him, Ayla shifted on the cot, and he heard the faint hiss of pain she tried to hide. "You need more water?" he asked without turning around. "No." "Food?" "No." "Sleep?" A pause. "Yeah." He glanced back. She was lying down again, eyes already half closed, her body finally giving in to the exhaustion it had been fighting. "Cole," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah?" "Thank you." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and turned back to the fire. Outside, the desert was silent. Inside, the woman named Ayla slept, and Cole sat in the dark, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The days that followed fell into a rhythm Cole didn't recognize. Ayla slept most of the first week, waking only to drink water, eat a few bites of whatever he put in front of her, and then collapse back into unconsciousness. Her fever broke on the third day, and the wound on her side started to close, the edges knitting together slowly but surely. She was strong, stronger than she had any right to be. But she didn't talk much, not about where she'd come from, not about what had happened to her, not about who might be looking for her. She answered his questions with one or two words, or didn't answer at all. And after a while, Cole stopped asking. It was easier that way. By the end of the second week, she was moving around the cabin, slowly, carefully, but moving. She didn't ask for help, didn't thank him again, just did what needed doing. She washed her own bandages, mended the shirt he'd given her, cleaned the dishes after meals. She didn't talk, but she wasn't rude about it, just quiet. Cole didn't mind. He'd spent 20 years alone. Silence was familiar, but there was something different about sharing silence with another person. It wasn't empty the way it used to be. It had weight, presence. He'd catch himself watching her sometimes, the way she moved, the way she held herself, the way her eyes tracked the door every time the wind rattled it. She was always ready to run. He wondered if she ever stopped being ready. One evening, as the sun dropped below the horizon and painted the desert orange and gold, Ayla stepped outside for the first time. Cole had been checking Dust's hooves, and he looked up to see her standing in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. She stared out at the desert like she was seeing it for the first time. "It's quiet," she said. "Yeah." "How long have you been out here?" 20 years, give or take." She glanced at him. "Alone?" "Mostly." "Why?" He straightened, brushing dirt off his hands. "Same reason you ended up in the sand, I'd guess. Didn't have anywhere else to go." She didn't respond to that, just stepped down off the porch and walked a few feet into the open, her boots crunching on the dry earth. She tilted her head back, looking up at the sky, and for the first time since he'd found her, she looked not peaceful, exactly, but less guarded, less like she was bracing for a fight. "It's different," she said quietly. "Different how?" "Where I'm from, you can't see the sky like this. Too many trees, too much smoke." Cole filed that away. Trees, smoke, and didn't push. "You miss it?" he asked. She was quiet for a long time. Then, "No." He believed her. They stood there in the fading light, not talking, and it was the first time since she'd woken up that Cole felt like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to end with one of them dead. But that night, everything changed. It was past midnight when Cole woke to the sound of hoofbeats. He was on his feet before his brain caught up, instinct pulling him out of sleep and across the room to the window. He pulled the curtain back just enough to see outside. 3 riders. Maybe 4. Hard to tell in the dark. They were moving slow, picking their way across the desert toward the cabin, and even from a distance, Cole could tell they weren't lost. They knew where they were going. Behind him, Ayla was already awake, sitting up on the cot, her eyes locked on the window. "You expecting company?" she asked, voice flat. "No." "They're here for me." It wasn't a question. Cole grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the wall, checked the chamber, loaded. "How many?" he asked. 4, maybe 5. "You know them?" "Yeah." "They gonna kill you?" She smiled, sharp and humorless. "They're gonna try." Cole crossed to the door, cracked it open, and peered out. The riders were closer now, maybe 100 yards out, and he could make out shapes. Big men, all of them, rifles slung across their backs. "You got a gun?" he asked, without turning around. "Not anymore." He reached under the cot, pulled out the spare revolver he kept there, and tossed it to her. She caught it one-handed, checked the cylinder, and nodded. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Fight for me." Cole looked at her. She was standing now, the gun held loose at her side, her face unreadable. "You can leave," she said. "Walk out the back, head for town. They won't follow you." "That's your plan?" "I don't have a plan, just a fight." Cole turned back to the window. The riders were close enough now that he could see their faces, hard and mean in the moonlight. "You run," he said. "They'll hunt you down." "Probably." "You stay. They'll burn this place to the ground." "Probably." He looked at her again. "You got any good news?" She almost smiled. "Not really." Cole exhaled, long and slow, and checked his rifle one more time. "All right," he said. "Let's see what they want." He stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, and waited. The riders reined in about 20 feet from the cabin, horses stamping and snorting. The man in front, big, barrel-chested, with a scar running down the side of his face, leaned forward in his saddle and grinned. "Evening," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel scraped over metal. "Evening," Cole replied. "You got something that belongs to us." "Don't think so." The man's grin widened. "Woman. About this tall, dark hair, mean as a rattlesnake. Seen her?" "Nope." "That's funny, 'cause we tracked her here. Storm slowed us down, but we tracked her here." Cole didn't move. "Then you tracked wrong." The man tilted his head, studying Cole like he was something interesting. "You got a name?" "Cole Turner." "Well, Mr. Turner, here's how this works. You hand over the woman, we ride out. Nobody gets hurt. You don't hand her over, we burn your little shack to the ground and take her anyway. Your choice." Cole's grip tightened on the rifle. "She's not yours to take. She killed 3 of my men. That makes her ours. Maybe they had it coming." The man's grin vanished. "You got no idea what you're in the middle of, friend." "Then educate me." Before the man could answer, the cabin door opened and Ayla stepped out. She didn't say anything, just stood there, the revolver in her hand, her eyes locked on the man in front. He stared at her. Then he started laughing, low and ugly. "There she is," he said. "Thought you were dead, girl." "Not yet," Ayla said. "You killed Mac. You killed Billy. You killed Torrance." "They touched me. I warned them." The man's face darkened. "You belong to us." "I don't belong to anybody." "We'll see about that." He reached for his rifle. Ayla shot him first. The sound cracked across the desert like thunder, and the man jerked back in his saddle, clutching his shoulder. His horse reared, and he nearly fell, cursing and shouting. The other riders scattered, yanking their guns free, and all hell broke loose. Cole fired, dropping one man clean off his horse. Ayla moved like water, diving off the porch and rolling behind a pile of firewood as bullets tore through the air where she'd been standing. She came up firing, and another rider went down. Cole reloaded, fired again, missed. A bullet splintered the wood next to his head, and he ducked back into the cabin, slamming the door. He moved to the window, smashed out the glass with the rifle butt, and started firing through the opening. Outside, Ayla was a blur. She moved fast, never staying in one place long enough to get pinned down, her shots precise and clean. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't scared. She was hunting. Cole had seen a lot of fights in his life. He'd been in a few, but he'd never seen anything like this. The man with the scar was back on his horse, blood streaming down his arm, shouting orders. The two remaining riders flanked out, trying to circle the cabin, and Cole swung his rifle toward one of them. A bullet punched through the wall an inch from his head, and he hit the floor hard. Splinters rained down on him, and he rolled, came up firing blind through the window. Outside, Ayla dropped the last rider with a shot to the chest, then turned towards the man with the scar. He was aiming at her. Cole didn't think. He burst out the door, rifle up, and fired. The shot went wide, but it was enough. The man's horse spooked, rearing, and Ayla fired twice, once at the man, once at the horse. The horse bolted, and the man hit the ground hard, tumbling into the dirt. Ayla was on him in seconds, the revolver pressed to his head. "Move and you're dead," she said. The man froze. Cole crossed the distance, rifle trained on the man's chest, breathing hard. The other riders were down, 2 dead, 1 bleeding out in the sand. The night was silent again, except for the ragged sound of their breathing. Ayla looked up at Cole, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that might have been gratitude. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yeah, I did." She nodded, then she turned back to the man on the ground. "Who sent you?" she asked. The man spat blood. "Go to hell." She pressed the gun harder against his skull. "Who sent you? You know who. Say it." "Cade." Ayla's jaw tightened. "He's still in Redstone?" "You'll never make it that far." "We'll see." She stood, stepped back, and Cole thought she might pull the trigger, but she didn't, just lowered the gun and looked at him. "Let him go," she said. Cole blinked. "What?" "Let him go. He's going to ride back and tell Cade I'm alive, and then Cade's going to come for me." "That's your plan?" "That's the only plan." The man on the ground laughed, wet and ugly. "You're dead, girl. You're already dead." Ayla didn't look at him, just at Cole. "Your choice," she said. "You want him gone, or you want him dead." Cole stared at her, then at the man, then back at her. "Get him a horse," he said finally. 5 minutes later, the man was gone, riding hard into the dark, and Cole and Ayla stood in the wreckage of the fight, surrounded by bodies and spent shells. "This Cade," Cole said. "He gonna stop?" "No." "How many men does he have?" "Enough." "And you're gonna go after him?" She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Cole looked out at the desert, then back at the cabin. The walls were riddled with bullet holes, the window was gone, and there was blood soaking into the dirt. 20 years of peace shattered in one night. He should have been angry. Should have told her to leave, to take her war somewhere else. But when he looked at her, standing there in the moonlight, blood on her hands, fire in her eyes, he didn't feel angry. He felt awake. "You hungry?" he asked. Ayla blinked. "What?" "It's going to be a long night. Might as well eat something." She stared at him. Then, slowly, she smiled. Real, this time. "Yeah," she said. "I could eat." They turned back toward the cabin, and Cole knew, without a doubt, that nothing was ever going to be the same. They buried the bodies at first light. Cole didn't ask questions, and Ayla didn't offer explanations. They just dragged the 3 dead men far enough from the cabin that the buzzards wouldn't circle overhead for weeks, dug shallow graves in the hard-packed earth, and covered them up. It took most of the morning. By the time they were done, the sun was high and merciless, and both of them were coated in dust and sweat. Ayla leaned on the shovel, staring down at the disturbed ground, and Cole wondered what she was thinking. If she felt anything. Regret, maybe, or satisfaction. Her face gave nothing away. "They have families?" he asked. She shook her head. "Men like that don't have families. Just people who owe them." "And Cade? He got people who owe him?" "Yeah." She turned to look at him, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of the hat she'd borrowed. A lot of people. Cole stabbed his shovel into the dirt and left it there. Then we should probably fix that cabin before they show up. They walked back in silence, the desert sprawling around them like an ocean of nothing. The cabin looked worse in daylight, windows shattered, walls pocked with bullet holes, the door hanging crooked on its hinges. It wasn't much to begin with, but now it looked like something the world had chewed up and spat out. Cole stood in the doorway, hands on his hips, surveying the damage. Well, he said, could be worse. How? Could be on fire. Ayla almost smiled. They spent the rest of the day patching what they could. Cole boarded up the broken window with planks he'd been saving for a new fence, while Ayla stitched up the holes in the walls with strips of canvas and tar. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold. The door was a lost cause, frame was cracked, hinges bent. So Cole yanked it off entirely and leaned it against the side of the cabin. He'd build a new one eventually. For now, a heavy blanket would have to do. Ayla worked without complaint, moving carefully to avoid pulling her stitches, but she didn't slow down. Cole caught himself watching her again. The way she handled the tools like she'd done this before. The way she didn't flinch when she accidentally scraped her knuckles raw on the rough wood. She was used to pain, used to pushing through it. You ever build anything? He asked, more to fill the silence than anything else. Not like this. What then? She was quiet for a moment, smoothing tar over a patched hole. Shelters, lean-tos, things that don't last. Why not? Because we didn't stay. We? She didn't answer. Cole let it drop. He hammered another board into place, then stepped back to inspect his work. It was rough, uneven, but it would keep the wind out. That was enough. By the time the sun started to sink, the cabin was as patched as it was going to get. Cole built a fire in the stove, heated up the last of the beans and salt pork, and they ate in silence. Ayla sat on the floor with her back against the wall, the revolver still tucked into her belt, and Cole took the chair by the table. The blanket over the doorway fluttered in the evening breeze, and somewhere outside a coyote howled. You think he's already on his way? Cole asked. Cade? Yeah. Ayla chewed slowly, staring into the fire. Probably. Depends how fast that man rode. If he went straight back, Cade knows by now. How long until he gets here? 3 days? Maybe 4? Cole set his plate down. That's not a lot of time. No. You got a plan? Leave before he shows up. That's not a plan. That's running. She looked at him, and there was something hard in her eyes. What's wrong with running? Nothing, if that's what you want. What I want doesn't matter. It's what keeps me alive. Cole leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You been running a long time? Long enough. And it's worked out for you? She smiled, bitter. I'm still breathing. For now. Her jaw tightened. What's your point? My point, Cole said, is that running only works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you better hope you got something else lined up. Like what? A cabin in the middle of nowhere? 3 bullets and a prayer? Like knowing when to stop. Ayla stared at him. Then she laughed, short, sharp, humorless. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not, but I know you didn't end up half dead in the desert because running was working out so well. That hit. He saw it in the way her shoulders went rigid, the way her hand dropped to the revolver without thinking. For a second he thought she might pull it on him, but she didn't. Just stood up, slow and deliberate, and walked to the door. She pushed the blanket aside and stepped out into the night, and Cole sat there alone, staring at the fire, wondering if he'd just made a mistake. He gave her 10 minutes. Then he followed. She was standing at the edge of the porch, arms crossed, staring out at the desert. The sky was bruised purple and orange, stars just starting to poke through, and the air was cooling fast. Cole stopped a few feet behind her, close enough to talk, but far enough to give her space. I shouldn't have said that, he said. She didn't turn around. Why not? It's true. Still wasn't my place. No, it wasn't. They stood there in silence, and Cole waited. He'd learned a long time ago that some people needed space to talk, and some people needed space to not talk. Ayla seemed like the second kind. But then she spoke. "I was 12 when I ran the first time," she said quietly. "My father sold me to a man named Voss, told me it was for the family, told me it was temporary. It wasn't." Cole didn't say anything. "I stayed with Voss for 2 years. He put me to work in his camp, cooking, cleaning, whatever he needed. At night, he locked me in a shed with the other girls. There were 5 of us. We didn't talk much. Talking just made it worse." She paused, and Cole saw her hands tighten into fists. "When I was 14, one of the girls tried to run. They caught her before she made it a mile. Voss made us watch while he beat her to death. Said it was a lesson. Said it was what happened to girls who didn't know their place." Cole's chest went tight. "I ran the next night," Ayla said. "Didn't plan it. Didn't think about it. Just waited until Voss was asleep, broke the lock, and ran. I thought they'd catch me. Thought I'd end up like her, but I didn't." "Where'd you go?" "North, kept moving, stayed off the roads, stayed out of towns, ate what I could steal, slept where I wouldn't be found. I was alone for 6 months before I found the camp." "What camp?" "A group of people like me. People who didn't fit anywhere else. Outcasts, deserters, runaways. They took me in, taught me how to survive, taught me how to fight." "That where you learned to shoot like that?" She nodded. "Among other things." "And Cade?" Her shoulders tensed. "Cade came later. He was a trader, moved through the camps, bought and sold whatever people needed. Guns, food, medicine. He seemed decent at first, friendly, helpful." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out he was just watching, figuring out who was vulnerable, who he could take. He took you. Not just me, 6 of us. He waited until we were separated from the main group, then came in fast with his men. We fought, but we weren't ready. By the time it was over, 3 of us were dead, and the rest of us were in chains." Cole felt something cold settle in his gut. "What'd he do with you?" "Sold us. Same as Voss. Different buyer. Same cage." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were hard. "I spent 3 years working for a man who thought he owned me. And when I finally got free, I swore I'd never let anyone put me in a cage again." "The men you killed," Cole said, "the ones who came here, they worked for Cade?" "Yeah. He sent them to bring me back. Probably told them not to kill me. Just hurt me enough that I wouldn't fight. But you did. I always do." Cole looked out at the desert, at the endless stretch of nothing, and tried to imagine what it was like to spend your whole life running, to never stop looking over your shoulder, to never feel safe. "I get it," he said quietly. "Do you?" "More than you think." She studied him, and for the first time, there was something other than suspicion in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. "Why are you out here, Cole?" she asked. "A man doesn't live 20 years alone in the desert unless he's running from something." Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I killed a man." Ayla didn't react, just waited. "It was a long time ago," Cole continued. "I was younger, stupider, got into a fight over a card game. Wasn't even my fight, but I got involved anyway. Things got heated, and the other guy pulled a knife. I pulled a gun. Self-defense. Yeah, but the man I killed, he had a family, a wife, 2 kids, and they didn't care that it was self-defense. They cared that he was dead. So you ran. Yeah, came out here, built the cabin, and figured I'd just disappear. Let the world forget about me." "Did it work?" Cole smiled faintly. "Until you showed up." Ayla looked at him for a long moment, and then she did something he didn't expect. She laughed. Not bitter, not cold, just real. A low, genuine sound that softened the hard edges of her face. "We're a hell of a pair," she said. "Yeah, we are." They stood there in the cooling night, and for the first time since she'd woken up in his cabin, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt almost comfortable. "You don't have to come with me," Ayla said finally. "When I leave. You don't owe me that." "I know. Cade's going to come whether you're here or not." "I know that too." "Then why are you still here?" Cole thought about that, about the 20 years he'd spent alone, convincing himself it was enough. about the woman who'd stumbled into his life and reminded him what it felt like to be something other than invisible. "Because I'm tired of running," he said. Ayla looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. "Okay," she said quietly. They went back inside, and Cole stoked the fire while Ayla checked her stitches. The wound on her side was healing, the edges pink and clean, but it would leave a scar, another one to add to the collection. "You should get some sleep," Cole said. "We've got work to do tomorrow." "What kind of work?" "The kind that keeps us alive when Cade shows up." She raised an eyebrow. "You got a plan?" "Working on it." "Care to share?" Cole pulled out the map he kept tucked in the drawer of the table. A hand-drawn thing, rough but accurate, showing the land for 20 miles in every direction. He spread it out and tapped a spot about 5 miles north. "There's a canyon here," he said. "Narrow. Only one way in, one way out. If we can get Cade and his men to follow us there, we can bottleneck them. Pick them off." Ayla leaned over the map, studying it. "How many men does Cade usually travel with?" "You tell me." 10, maybe 12. Cole grimaced. "That's a lot." "Yeah." "We'd need more guns. Or better positioning. Or both." Ayla traced her finger along the map, following the route from the cabin to the canyon. "It's risky. If they figure out what we're doing, they'll just wait us out. Or burn us out." "True. But if we stay here, we're sitting ducks." She nodded slowly. "All right. Canyon it is." They spent the next hour planning where to set up, how to funnel Cade's men into the narrow passage, how to cover their retreat if things went wrong. It wasn't a perfect plan. Hell, it wasn't even a good plan. But it was something. By the time they finished, it was late and the fire was burning low. Ayla stretched, wincing as the movement pulled at her side. "You should take the cot," Cole said. "Where are you going to sleep?" "Floor's fine." "Cole, it's fine. I've slept in worse places." She looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Just nodded and moved to the cot, easing herself down carefully. Cole grabbed a blanket and stretched out on the floor near the fire, using his saddlebag as a pillow. For a while, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of the wind outside. Then Ayla spoke. "Cole? Yeah? You ever think about going back to wherever you came from?" Cole stared at the ceiling. "Sometimes, but there's nothing to go back to." "No family?" "Not anymore." "A friends?" "Lost touch." She was quiet. Then, "Do you miss it?" "The people?" "Yeah." "The life?" "Not so much." "Why not?" "Because I spent most of it trying to be someone I wasn't. Out here, I don't have to pretend." "What were you pretending to be?" Cole smiled faintly. "Someone worth knowing." Ayla didn't respond to that. But a few minutes later, just as Cole was drifting off, he heard her voice again, soft, almost too quiet to hear. "You are, you know." "And what?" "Worth knowing." Cole opened his eyes, staring at the dark beams overhead, and didn't know what to say. So he didn't say anything. And eventually, the silence pulled him under. The next 2 days blurred together in a rhythm of preparation and tension. They moved supplies out to the canyon, ammunition, water, dried food, anything they might need if things went sideways. Cole showed Ayla the best vantage points, the places where the rocks formed natural cover, the spots where a single shooter could hold off half a dozen men if they were smart about it. She learned fast, asked the right questions, didn't waste time on the wrong ones. By the second day, she was moving through the canyon like she'd been there her whole life, calculating angles and distances in her head. They didn't talk much during the work. There wasn't time. But in the evenings, when they sat by the fire and ate whatever Cole managed to scrape together, the conversations came easier. Ayla told him about the camp, the people she'd lived with, the way they'd moved from place to place, always one step ahead of trouble. She talked about the woman who'd taught her to shoot, a hard-eyed ex-soldier named Mariki, who didn't believe in second chances but gave Ayla one anyway. She talked about the nights they'd spent around fires just like this one, trading stories and lies and the occasional truth. Cole told her about his life before the desert, the ranch he'd grown up on, the cattle drives, the long days under a sun that baked the land dry. He told her about his father, a man who spoke in grunts and nods and expected the same from everyone else. He told her about the fight that had sent him running, the look on the dead man's wife's face when she'd seen his body. "You ever think about finding them?" Ayla asked. "The family?" "No." "Why not?" "What would I say? Sorry I killed your husband, but he had it coming. That's not going to bring him back. Maybe they don't need him back. Maybe they just need to know you're sorry." Cole looked at her. "You ever go back? To the people Cade took you from?" Ayla shook her head. "No." "Why not?" "Same reason you didn't. What's the point? They moved on. I moved on. Going back doesn't change what happened." "Maybe not, but it might change what happens next." She stared into the fire, and he could see her turning that over in her mind. "Maybe," she said finally. On the third night, the wind changed. Cole felt it first, a shift in the air, a chill that hadn't been there before. He stepped outside and looked toward the horizon, and his gut tightened. "Ayla!" he called. She came to the door, pulling the blanket aside. "What?" "Company." She followed his gaze, and they both saw it at the same time, dust rising in the distance, lit orange by the setting sun. A lot of dust. More than 4 men could kick up. "That's them," Ayla said. "You sure?" "Yeah." Cole watched the dust cloud for a moment longer, then turned to her. "How much time do we have?" "An hour, maybe less." "Then we move now." They grabbed what they could, rifles, ammunition, the last of the water, and headed for the canyon. Dust was already saddled, and Cole swung up, pulling Ayla up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, and he felt the tension in her body, coiled tight like a spring. "You ready?" he asked. "No." "Me neither." He kicked Dust into a gallop, and they tore across the desert toward the canyon, the dying light bleeding across the sky behind them. By the time they reached the canyon, the dust cloud was closer. Cole could make out shapes now, riders, maybe a dozen of them, moving fast. He and Ayla dismounted, and he sent Dust running deeper into the canyon, out of the line of fire. "Positions," Cole said. Ayla climbed up to the ridge on the left side of the canyon entrance, rifle in hand, while Cole took the right. From here, they had a clear view of the approach. Anyone coming in would be exposed, with nowhere to hide. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best they had. They waited. The sun dropped below the horizon, and the canyon filled with shadow. Cole's hands were steady on the rifle, but his heart was pounding. He glanced across the canyon and saw Ayla, crouched behind a boulder, her face unreadable. Then he heard it. Hoofbeats. They came in fast. A line of riders spread out across the desert, and at the front was a man Cole recognized from Ayla's description. Cade. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face like carved stone and eyes that didn't blink. He raised a hand, and the riders stopped about 50 yards from the canyon entrance. Cade looked up at the rocks, scanning the shadows, and smiled. "Ayla," he called. His voice echoed off the canyon walls. "I know you're up there." Silence. "You killed 3 of my men," Cade continued. "That's bad for business, but I'm a reasonable man. You come down, we talk, maybe we work something out." Ayla's voice cut through the dark, cold, and clear. "There's nothing to work out," Cade laughed. "You always were stubborn. I like that about you." "Go to hell, Cade. Eventually, but not today." He gestured to the men behind him. "Here's how this works. You come down, or we come up. Either way, you're leaving with me." "I'm not leaving with you." "Then I guess we're doing this the hard way." Cade raised his hand again, and the riders spurred their horses forward. Cole fired first. The shot cracked through the canyon, and the lead rider went down, his horse screaming. The others scattered, yanking their rifles free, and the night exploded into chaos. Ayla fired, reloaded, fired again. Cole did the same, picking his targets, trying to keep them pinned at the entrance. But there were too many, and they were spreading out, using the rocks for cover, working their way up the canyon walls. "They're flanking!" Ayla shouted. Cole swore, swung his rifle toward the left, and fired at a shape moving through the shadows. The shape dropped, but another took its place. They were coming from both sides now, closing in. "Fall back!" Cole yelled. Ayla didn't argue. She grabbed her rifle and ran, scrambling deeper into the canyon, and Cole followed. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks around them, and he felt one graze his shoulder, hot and sharp. He stumbled, caught himself, kept moving. They reached a narrow choke point about halfway through the canyon, a place where the walls closed in tight. Cole skidded to a stop, turned, and fired at the nearest rider. The man went down, and the others hesitated. "This is as far as they get," Cole said, breathing hard. Ayla nodded, blood streaking her face from a cut above her eye. "Agreed." They dug in, side by side, and held the line. The fight lasted what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Cade's men kept coming, kept pushing, but the narrow passage worked in Cole and Ayla's favor. They couldn't be surrounded, couldn't be overwhelmed. One by one, the riders fell back, dragging their wounded with them. Then, suddenly, it was quiet. Cole lowered his rifle, chest heaving, and looked at Ayla. She was reloading, hand steady despite the blood and dirt. "You hit?" he asked. "Just a scratch. You?" "Same." They waited, listening. No hoofbeats, no shouts, just silence. Then Cade's voice echoed through the canyon again. "Impressive," he called, "but you can't stay in there forever." "We can stay longer than you," Ayla shouted back. "Maybe, but I've got time, and patience, and a lot more men than you've got bullets." Cole glanced at Ayla. She met his eyes, and he saw the truth there. Cade was right. They couldn't win this. Not here, not like this. "So what now?" Cole asked quietly. Ayla looked at him, and for the first time he saw something that might have been fear. "I don't know," she said. And in the darkness of the canyon, surrounded by enemies and running out of options, Cole realized that neither did he. The night stretched on, cold and merciless, and Cole counted their remaining ammunition twice just to be sure. 17 rounds between them. Maybe 18 if the one cartridge he'd dropped earlier wasn't dented beyond use. Against a dozen men, it wasn't enough, not even close. Ayla sat with her back against the canyon wall, rifle across her knees, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the choke point. Blood had dried on her temple, and her breathing was still uneven from the fight. She hadn't said anything in the last 20 minutes, and Cole didn't push. Sometimes silence was all you had left. Outside, Cade's men had pulled back but not left. Cole could hear them moving around, setting up camp maybe, or just waiting for dawn when they could see what they were shooting at. Either way, the message was clear. They weren't going anywhere. "We could make a run for it," Cole said finally, keeping his voice low. "Wait until they're settled, slip out the back of the canyon." Ayla shook her head. "They'll have men posted. Cade's not stupid. Then we wait them out." "With what? We've got half a canteen of water and no food. They can sit out there for a week if they want to." Cole knew she was right. He just didn't want to admit it. "So what do you want to do?" he asked. Ayla was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I should go out there." "What?" "Turn myself in, end this. Like hell." "Cole, this is my fight, not yours. You didn't sign up for this." "I signed up the second I pulled you out of that desert." "That was different. You were saving a life. This—" She gestured toward the darkness where Cade's men waited. "This is suicide." Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You think if you walk out there, Cade's just going to let you go? You think he's going to say, 'Oh, well, thanks for coming back, all's forgiven'?" "No, but maybe he'll let you go." "I don't want him to let me go." "Why not?" Her voice was sharp now, frustrated. "What are you trying to prove?" "I'm not trying to prove anything." "Then why are you still here?" Cole looked at her, and the words came out before he could stop them. "Because for the first time in 20 years, I'm not alone." That stopped her. She stared at him, and something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away. "That's not a good enough reason to die," she said quietly. "Maybe not. But it's a good enough reason to fight." They sat in silence after that, the weight of what he'd said settling between them like a stone. Cole didn't regret it. He'd spent too many years keeping everything locked down, buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it was there. But Ayla had cracked something open in him, and now it was too late to shove it back. "We need a new plan," Ayla said finally. "Yeah, we do. Any ideas?" Cole thought about it. The canyon was a dead end, literally. The only way out was the way they'd come in, and Cade's men had that covered, but there were other options. Riskier options. "There's a trail," he said slowly, "on the east wall, about a quarter-mile back. It's narrow, barely wide enough for a horse, but it leads up and out onto the plateau." "You've used it before?" "Once. Long time ago." "Is it safe?" "No." Ayla laughed, short and bitter. "Of course it's not. But it's a way out. And if we move now, before dawn, we might make it before they realize we're gone." She considered that, chewing her lip. "What about Dust?" "We leave her. She'll find her way back to the cabin. And if we fall, then we fall." Ayla looked at him, and for a second he thought she might argue, but she didn't, just nodded. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." They moved fast and quiet, gathering what little they had, rifles, the canteen, a handful of bullets. Cole led the way deeper into the canyon, using the moonlight to navigate the uneven ground. Behind him, Ayla moved like a shadow, her footsteps barely audible. The trail was right where he remembered it, a thin slash in the rock face, steep and crumbling, disappearing into darkness above. Cole tested the first few handholds, felt the stone shift under his weight, and swore under his breath. "This is insane," Ayla murmured. "You got a better idea?" "No." "Then up we go." Cole went first, finding footholds in the dark, hauling himself up inch by inch. The rock was loose, unstable, and more than once he felt it start to give way beneath him. But he kept moving, kept climbing, and tried not to think about how far the ground was below. Ayla followed, her breathing labored, and Cole knew the wound in her side was screaming at her. But she didn't complain, didn't slow down, just kept climbing. They were halfway up when the first shout echoed through the canyon. Someone had noticed they were gone. "Move!" Cole hissed, and they scrambled faster, hands scraping on stone, boots slipping on loose gravel. Below, he could hear men shouting, running, and then the crack of a rifle shot. The bullet pinged off the rock a few feet to his left, and he flinched, nearly losing his grip. "Don't stop!" Ayla shouted. Another shot, closer this time. Cole pulled himself up onto a narrow ledge, turned, and reached down to grab Ayla's hand. He hauled her up beside him just as another bullet whined past, so close he felt the air move. "Keep going!" he said, and they did, scrambling up the last stretch of the trail as gunfire erupted below. The plateau was just above them now, flat and open, and Cole threw himself over the edge, rolled, and came up on his knees. Ayla landed beside him a second later, gasping, and they both lay there for a moment, chests heaving, staring up at the stars. "We made it," Ayla said, disbelief in her voice. "Don't celebrate yet." Cole sat up and looked back the way they'd come. Down in the canyon, he could see torches moving, hear Cade's voice shouting orders. They'd figure out the trail soon enough, and when they did, they'd be coming. "We need to move," Cole said. "Where?" "North. There's a line of mesas about 10 miles out. We can lose them there." 10 miles on foot? You got a better idea?" Ayla pushed herself to her feet, wincing. "I'm starting to hate that question." They ran. The desert at night was a different animal, cold, disorienting, full of shadows that moved in ways they shouldn't. Cole led the way, navigating by the stars, trying to keep them on a straight line north. Behind them, the torches in the canyon grew smaller, but he knew it wouldn't last. Cade had horses. They didn't. It was only a matter of time. Ayla kept pace for the first few miles, but by the fourth she was limping. Cole slowed, glanced back, and saw the dark stain spreading across her side. "You're bleeding," he said. "I know. We need to stop." "We can't." "Ayla, I said we can't." She pushed past him, and Cole let her go, fighting back the argument. She was right. Stopping meant dying, but so did running until she collapsed. They made it another mile before her legs gave out. She went down hard, hands and knees hitting the dirt, and Cole was beside her in an instant. He grabbed her shoulders, tried to pull her up, but she shook her head. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't." "Yes, you can." Cole, listen to me. He gripped her face, forced her to look at him. You are not dying out here. You hear me? Not after everything. Not now. She stared at him, eyes glassy with pain and exhaustion, and for a second he thought she was going to argue. But then she nodded, just barely, and let him pull her to her feet. He slung her arm over his shoulder, took most of her weight, and they kept moving. Slower now, stumbling more than running, but moving. The mesas rose in the distance, jagged shapes against the starlit sky, and Cole fixed his eyes on them and refused to look back. They reached the base of the first mesa just as the sky started to lighten. Cole found a crack in the rock face, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through, and pulled Ayla inside. It opened into a small cave, dry and sheltered, and he eased her down onto the ground. "Stay here," he said. "Where are you going?" "To cover our tracks." He stepped back outside and spent the next 10 minutes dragging brush over their footprints, scattering rocks, doing everything he could to make it look like they'd never been there. It wasn't much, but it might buy them time. When he ducked back into the cave, Ayla was slumped against the wall, eyes closed. For a second, Cole's heart stopped, but then he saw her chest rise and fall, and he exhaled. He knelt beside her, peeled back the torn fabric of her shirt, and grimaced. The wound had reopened, blood seeping through the old bandage. He tore a strip from his own shirt, folded it into a pad, and pressed it against her side. Ayla's eyes fluttered open. "That bad?" "I've seen worse." "Liar." He smiled faintly. "Yeah." She closed her eyes again, and Cole kept pressure on the wound, watching her face. She looked younger like this, vulnerable in a way she never let herself be when she was awake. It made his chest ache. "Cole," she murmured. "Yeah?" "If I don't make it, don't." "If I don't, she continued, you should go back to your cabin. Forget about all this. I'm not leaving you. You might not have a choice. There's always a choice." She opened her eyes, looked at him. "Why are you like this?" "Like what?" "Stubborn, impossible, willing to die for someone you barely know." Cole thought about that. Then he said, "Because I spent 20 years being alone, and I forgot what it was like to care about someone. You reminded me, and I'm not giving that up." Ayla stared at him, and something in her expression cracked. Not much, just enough. "You're an idiot," she said softly. "Yeah, I know." She reached up, her hand trembling, and touched his face. Just for a second. Then she let it fall. "Thank you," she whispered. Before Cole could respond, he heard it. Hoofbeats. Close. Too close. He moved to the entrance of the cave, peered out, and his stomach dropped. Cade's men were spread out across the desert, searching, and they were headed straight toward the mesa. "They're here," he said. Ayla sat up, teeth gritted against the pain. "How many?" "All of them." "Can we run?" Cole looked at her, pale, bleeding, barely able to stand, and knew the answer. "No," he said. "Then we fight." "With what? We've got maybe 10 rounds left. Then we make them count." Cole stared at her, and despite everything, despite the blood and the pain and the certainty that they were about to die, he felt something close to admiration. "You're insane," he said. "So are you." They positioned themselves at the entrance of the cave, rifles ready, and waited. The hoofbeats grew louder, and then the riders appeared, 6 of them, fanned out, moving slow and cautious. Cade wasn't with them. He'd sent his men to do the dirty work. Cole sighted down his rifle, finger on the trigger, and waited for them to get closer. 50 yards. 40. 30. He fired. The lead rider jerked back, clutching his chest, and toppled from his horse. The others scattered, shouting, yanking their guns free, and the desert exploded into gunfire. Cole and Ayla fired in rhythm, covering each other, picking their shots. 2 more men went down, then a third. But the others had found cover, and now they were shooting back, bullets sparking off the rocks around the cave entrance. "We can't hold this!" Ayla shouted over the noise. "I know!" A bullet clipped the rock inches from Cole's head, and he ducked back, heart hammering. They were pinned, outgunned, out of time. And then, from somewhere behind the riders, A new sound cut through the chaos. More gunfire. Cole risked a glance and saw them, riders, maybe a dozen, pouring over the ridge to the east. They were shooting at Cade's men, driving them back, and for a second Cole thought he was hallucinating. But then one of the riders broke away from the group and charged toward the cave, and Cole saw her face. It was a woman, older, maybe 50, with iron gray hair and a rifle in one hand. She reined her horse in hard, leapt down, and ran toward them. "Ayla!" she shouted. Ayla's head snapped up, and her eyes went wide. "Marika!" The woman, Marika, skidded to a stop at the cave entrance, breathing hard. "You look like hell." "What are you doing here?" "Saving your ass. What does it look like?" She turned to Cole. "You Turner?" "Yeah. Who are you?" "Friend of hers. Now get up. We're leaving." Behind her, the other riders were closing in, pushing Cade's men back. One of them grabbed the reins of a riderless horse and brought it to the cave. "Can you ride?" Murieki asked Ayla. "I can try." "Good enough." Between Cole and Murieki, they got Ayla onto the horse, and Cole swung up behind her, holding her steady. Murieki mounted her own horse, and they took off, the rest of the riders forming a protective circle around them. Cade's men tried to give chase, but Murieki's people cut them off, and within minutes they were gone, swallowed by the desert. They rode hard for an hour before Murieka finally called a halt. They were deep in the mesas now, sheltered by towering rock walls, and Cole could barely see the sky above. Murieka dismounted and strode over to them. "Let me see her." Cole helped Ayla down, and Murieka knelt beside her, inspecting the wound with practiced efficiency. "You tore half your stitches," she said flatly. "I noticed," Ayla muttered. "You're lucky you didn't bleed out." "Wasn't planning on it." Marique pulled a kit from her saddlebag and went to work, cleaning and restitching the wound while Ayla sat stone-faced and silent. When she was done, she stood and looked at Cole. "You the one who patched her up the first time?" "Yeah." "Not bad, for an amateur." "Thanks, I think." Marieke studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. Most men would have run." "I'm not most men." "No, I can see that." She turned to Ayla. "You want to tell me what the hell you were thinking, taking on Cade with one gun and a half-dead cowboy?" "I wasn't thinking," Ayla said. "I was surviving." "That's not a plan." "It's the only one I had." Marieke sighed and shook her head. "You're going to get yourself killed one of these days." "Maybe, but not today." Marieke's expression softened just a little. "No, not today." She turned and walked back to her horse, and Cole sat down beside Ayla, exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. "Who is she?" he asked. "The woman I told you about, the one who taught me to shoot." "How'd she find us?" "I don't know." Ayla looked over at Marieke, who was talking to the other riders. "But I'm glad she did." Cole nodded, and they sat in silence, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Around them, Marieke's people moved with quiet efficiency, tending horses, checking weapons, setting up a perimeter. They were a hard-looking bunch, scarred and weathered, but there was a sense of order to them, discipline. After a while, Marieke came back over and crouched in front of Ayla. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "About what you're going to do next." Ayla frowned. "What do you mean?" "Cade's not going to stop. You know that. He's got too much pride, too much to lose. You humiliated him, killed his men, made him look weak. He'll keep coming until one of you is dead. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you've got two choices. You can keep running, keep fighting, and hope you get lucky, or you can come back with us." "Back where?" "To the camp, the real one, north of Redstone, in the high country. We've got walls, defenses, people who can fight. Cade's never been able to touch us there." Ayla shook her head. "I left, Marieke. I walked away. And now you're coming back. It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because I don't belong there anymore." Marieke's expression hardened. "You never stopped belonging, Ayla. You just convinced yourself you didn't. That's not... Listen to me." Marieke leaned forward, her voice low and fierce. You spent 3 years in chains because you were alone. You think that would have happened if you'd stayed with us? If you'd had people watching your back? I don't need people watching my back. Everyone needs people. That's the whole damn point. Ayla looked away, jaw tight, and Cole could see the conflict in her eyes. Part of her wanted to believe Murieki. Part of her didn't. What about him? Ayla asked, nodding toward Cole. Marika glanced at him. What about him? If I go back, he comes with me. That's not up to me. Then whose decision is it? His. They both turned to look at Cole, and he felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing. You want me to come with you? He asked Ayla. She hesitated, then, yes. Why? Because I don't want to do this alone anymore. Cole looked at her, at the woman who'd stumbled into his life half dead and upended everything he thought he knew about himself. At the woman who'd fought beside him, bled beside him, trusted him when she had no reason to. And he realized something. He didn't want to be alone anymore either. All right, he said. I'll come. Ayla's eyes widened. You will? Yeah. Just like that? Just like that. She stared at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled, really smiled, wide and unguarded. Thank you, she said quietly. Marika stood, brushing dirt off her pants. It's settled then. We leave at nightfall. Rest up. You're both going to need it. She walked away and Cole leaned back against the rock, letting the sun warm his face. Beside him, Ayla was quiet, but he could feel the tension draining out of her. You sure about this? She asked after a while. No. Then why'd you say yes? Cole thought about the cabin, the 20 years he'd spent convincing himself it was enough. The silence, the emptiness, the slow fade into nothing. Because I'm tired of being safe, he said. Ayla looked at him, and something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition. Yeah, she said softly. Me too. They sat there as the day stretched on, and for the first time in a long time, Cole felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. But as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Cole couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. That Cade was still out there, still hunting, still coming. And when he came, there would be blood. Marique's camp turned out to be exactly what she'd promised. A fortress carved into the side of a mountain, hidden by trees and accessible only through a narrow pass that could be defended by a handful of people. They arrived 3 days later, exhausted and battered, and Cole got his first real look at the place Ayla had come from. It was bigger than he'd expected. Maybe 200 people, living in a mix of tents and wooden structures, all organized with military precision. There were lookouts posted at the high points, patrols moving along the perimeter, and a sense of watchful readiness that reminded Cole of an army camp. This is home? He asked Ayla. It was, she said. Once. But people stared as they rode through the camp, some with curiosity, some with suspicion, and a few with what looked like recognition. One man, tall and broad-shouldered with a scar running across his jaw, stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Ayla. Is that? He started. Yeah, Mariki said. It's her. The man's face split into a grin, and he strode over, pulling Ayla into a crushing hug the second she dismounted. She winced but didn't pull away. We thought you were dead, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not yet, Rafe. He pulled back, holding her at arm's length, and his eyes flicked to the bandage on her side. What happened? Long story. You got time to tell it? Later. Rafe's gaze shifted to Cole and his smile faded. Who's this? Cole Turner. He's with me. With you how? The way that matters. Rafe studied Cole for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. If Ayla vouches for you, that's good enough. Over the next few days, Cole learned the rhythms of the camp. He learned that Murieki wasn't just a fighter. She was the leader, the one everyone turned to when decisions needed to be made. He learned that Rafe was her second in command, loyal to the bone and fiercely protective of the people under his care. He learned that most of the people here were like Ayla, outcasts, runaways, People who'd been chewed up by the world and spat out somewhere they didn't belong. And he learned that they were preparing for war. Cade's been pushing closer, Mariki explained one night, sitting around the fire with Cole, Ayla, and Rafe. He's been trying to take control of the trade routes, force people to pay for protection. Anyone who refuses ends up dead or worse. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Cole asked. Because he's got numbers and money and connections. Most people are too scared to stand up to him. But not you. Mariki smiled grimly. Not us. So what's the plan? We hit him before he hits us. Take the fight to Redstone where he's based and cut the head off the snake. That's suicide, Ayla said. Maybe, but it's the only way to end this. Ayla shook her head. You don't know him like I do. He's not just going to roll over because you show up with a few guns. We've got more than a few guns. It won't be enough. Then what do you suggest? Ayla was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I go in alone. The table went silent. No, Marika said flatly. I know him. I know how he thinks. If I can get close, you'll get yourself killed. Not if I'm smart about it. Ayla, he wants me, Mariki. Not you. Not the camp. Me. If I give him what he wants, maybe I can end this without anyone else dying. That's not happening, Cole said. Ayla turned to him. It's not your decision. Like hell, it's not. Cole, you walk in there alone, you're dead, and I'm not letting that happen. You don't get to decide that. Watch me. They stared at each other, and the fire crackled between them, filling the silence. Finally, Mariki spoke. There might be another way. They both turned to her. What way? Ayla asked. We send you in, but not alone. We send you with backup. Someone Cade won't see coming. Who? Marika looked at Cole. Him. Cole blinked. Me. Cade doesn't know you. Doesn't know you're connected to Ayla. You walk in as a trader, someone looking to do business, and Ayla comes in as your investment. You mean as a prisoner, Ayla said flatly. I mean as bait. Ayla shook her head. That's insane. So is going in alone. At least if I go alone, I'm the only one who dies. Nobody's dying, but, Cole said. Not you, not me. We do this smart. We do this careful, and we get out alive. You don't know that. No, but I know I'm not letting you do this by yourself. Ayla looked at him, and he saw the war playing out behind her eyes. The part of her that wanted to push him away, protect him, keep him safe, and the part that was tired of fighting alone. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she said quietly. We do it your way. Marique leaned back, satisfied. Good. We leave in 2 days. That gives us time to plan, to prepare, and to make sure everyone knows their role. And if it goes wrong? Rafe asked. Mariki's smile was cold. Then we burn Redstone to the ground. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Cole learned the layout of Redstone, memorized the faces of Cade's key men, practiced the story he'd tell if anyone asked too many questions. Ayla drilled him on Cade's habits, his weaknesses, the things that would make him drop his guard. And at night, when the camp was quiet and the fires had burned low, they sat together and didn't talk about the fact that this might be the last time. On the morning they were set to leave, Marika pulled Cole aside. You care about her, she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, enough to die for her? Cole thought about that. Then he said, enough to live for her. Mariki studied him, then nodded. Good answer. She talk about me? Cole asked. Not in so many words, but I've known her a long time, long enough to see when something's changed. And what's changed? Marique smiled faintly. She's not running anymore. They rode out at noon, Cole, Ayla, and a small group of Mariki's best fighters, all posing as traders and hired hands. The plan was simple. Cole and Ayla would go into Redstone openly, make contact with Cade, and get close enough to take him out. The others would stay on the outskirts, ready to move if things went wrong. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only one they had. Redstone was a sprawling, chaotic place, half town, half camp, built around a series of old mining operations that had dried up years ago. Now it was a hub for traders, mercenaries, and people who didn't ask too many questions. Perfect for someone like Cade. They rode in slowly, Cole in the lead with Ayla's hands bound loosely in front of her. To anyone watching, she looked like a prisoner, a commodity. It made Cole's skin crawl. They found Cade's compound on the north end of town, a cluster of buildings surrounded by a fence and guarded by men with rifles. Cole reined his horse in at the gate and called out, "I'm here to see Cade." One of the guards squinted at him. "Who's asking?" "Name's Turner. I've got something he might be interested in." The guard's eyes flicked to Ayla, and his expression changed. "Wait here." He disappeared inside, and Cole waited, heart pounding. Beside him, Ayla sat perfectly still, her face blank. "You ready?" he murmured. "No." "Me neither." The guard came back a few minutes later and opened the gate. "He'll see you, but the woman stays outside. She's part of the deal. Then you both come in, but any trouble, and you're both dead." "Understood." They dismounted and followed the guard through the compound. Cole kept his hand near his gun, eyes scanning for exits, for threats, for anything that might give them an edge. And then they were standing in front of Cade. He was exactly as Ayla had described, tall, stone-faced, with eyes that didn't blink. He sat behind a desk in a room that smelled like smoke and old leather, and when he saw Ayla, he smiled. "Well," he said, "look who's come home." Ayla didn't respond. Cade's gaze shifted to Cole. "And who are you?" "Cole Turner. I'm the one who found her." "Found her where?" "In the desert, half dead." "And you brought her to me out of the goodness of your heart?" "I brought her to you because I heard you were looking, and because I figured you'd pay well." Cade leaned back in his chair, studying Cole. "How much?" "That depends. How much is she worth to you?" Cade's smile widened. "More than you can imagine." And in that moment, Cole knew this was going to get ugly. Cade stood slow and deliberate and walked around the desk. His boots clicked on the wooden floor, each step measured, and Cole felt every muscle in his body tense. This was the moment. The razor's edge where everything could go right or catastrophically wrong. "You know what I like about you, Turner," Cade said, stopping a few feet away. "You've got nerve. Walking in here with my property, acting like you're doing me a favor." "I am doing you a favor," Cole said evenly. "Could have killed her, could have kept her, could have done a lot of things. Instead, I brought her here. And why would you do that?" "Because I'm practical, and because keeping her alive seemed more profitable than burying her." Cade laughed, a low, rough sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Practical, I like that." He turned his attention to Ayla, who stood perfectly still, her bound hands hanging loose in front of her. "And what about you? You got anything to say?" Ayla met his gaze, unflinching. "Go to hell." Cade's smile vanished. He moved fast, backhanding her across the face hard enough that she staggered. Cole's hand went to his gun instinctively, but he forced himself to stop, to breathe, to stay in character. Ayla straightened, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth, and stared at Cade with pure hatred. "Still got that fire," Cade said, almost admiringly. "I always liked that about you. Most people break, you just burn hotter." "You're going to regret this," Ayla said quietly. "Am I?" Cade turned back to Cole. "How much do you want for her?" Cole forced himself to think like a man who saw people as commodities, who measured worth in gold and didn't flinch at suffering. It made his skin crawl, but he kept his voice steady. 500. Cade raised an eyebrow. "That's steep." "She's worth it. You said so yourself." "I also said she's mine, which means I don't have to pay you anything." "You could do that," Cole agreed. "But then word gets around that Cade doesn't honor deals, makes it hard to do business." Cade studied him, and Cole could see the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. Finally, Cade nodded. 300, and you leave town tonight. 400, and I leave when I'm ready. You're pushing your luck, Turner. I'm naming my price. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Cade smiled, sharp and humorless. Fine, 400. But you're out of Redstone by morning, or my men will drag you out. Deal. Cade gestured to one of his men. Take her to the cellar. Make sure she's secured. The guard grabbed Ayla's arm and she didn't resist as he hauled her toward the door. But as she passed Cole, their eyes met, and he saw the message there clear as day, "Trust me." Then she was gone, and Cole was alone with Cade. "Drink?" Cade asked, already pouring 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle on his desk. "Sure." Cade handed him a glass, and they drank in silence. The whiskey was good, too good for a place like this, and Cole wondered how many people Cade had bled dry to afford it. "You ever think about what it takes to control a place like this?" Cade asked, settling back into his chair. "Can't say I have. It takes fear, respect, and the willingness to do what other people won't." He swirled the whiskey in his glass. "People think power comes from having the most guns or the most money, but that's not it. Power comes from making people believe you're untouchable." "And are you?" Cade smiled. "What do you think?" Cole took another sip, buying time. "I think you've got a good thing going here, but I also think you've got enemies. Lots of them. Everyone's got enemies. The trick is making sure they're more afraid of you than you are of them." "And Ayla? She one of your enemies?" "Ayla's a lesson," Cade said flatly. "She thought she could walk away, thought she could embarrass me in front of my men. I can't let that stand. If I do, every other person I've got working for me starts to think they can do the same. So you're making an example of her." "Exactly." Cole set his glass down, keeping his expression neutral. "When?" "Tomorrow. Public. Everyone in Redstone will see what happens when you cross me." "And what happens if someone tries to stop you?" Cade's eyes narrowed. "Why would they?" "Just curious." "They'd die, same as her." He leaned forward. "You got a problem with that, Turner?" "Not my business what you do with your property." "Good, because I'd hate to have to kill you too." Cole forced a smile. "Appreciate the concern." Cade laughed and poured another round. They drank, talked about nothing important, and the whole time Cole's mind was racing. He needed to get Ayla out of that cellar, needed to signal Marieka's people, needed to do it all without getting himself killed in the process. When Cade finally dismissed him, Cole stepped out into the compound and took a slow breath. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, and the camp was winding down for the night. Guards patrolled the perimeter, but they looked bored, complacent. That was good. Cole made his way to the stable where they'd left the horses, and as he passed the main building, he caught sight of the cellar entrance, a heavy wooden door set into the ground, padlocked and guarded by a single man. One guard. That was manageable. He spent the next hour waiting, watching, learning the guard's patterns. The man paced, smoked, checked the lock twice, and mostly looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When full dark settled in and the compound grew quiet, Cole made his move. He approached casually, hands visible, no threat. "Evening," he said. The guard straightened, hand going to his rifle. "What do you want?" "Cade sent me to check on the prisoner, make sure she's still breathing." "He didn't say anything about that." "You want to go ask him? Wake him up? Tell him you wouldn't let me do what he told me to do?" The guard hesitated, and Cole saw the doubt flicker across his face. Nobody wanted to be the one who pissed off Cade. "Make it quick," the guard muttered, unlocking the door. Cole descended the stairs into the cellar, and the guard followed, holding a lantern. The space was small, damp, and cold. Ayla sat against the far wall, hands still bound, but her eyes were sharp and alert when she saw him. "She giving you trouble?" the guard asked. "Not yet." Cole crossed to Ayla, crouched down, and pretended to check her bindings. Under his breath, he whispered, "Midnight, be ready." She gave the slightest nod. Cole stood, turned to the guard. "She's fine, let's go." They went back up the stairs, and the guard locked the door behind them. Cole walked away, heart pounding, and didn't look back. He found Mariki's people camped just outside town, hidden in a cluster of rocks about a mile from Redstone's edge. Rafe met him at the perimeter, rifle in hand. "How'd it go?" he asked. "About as well as you'd expect. Cade bought the story, but he's planning to kill her tomorrow. Publicly." Rafe swore. "Where is she now?" "Cellar. One guard. I told her to be ready at midnight." "That's not much time." "It's all we've got." Marika appeared from the shadows, her face grim. "What's the plan?" We go in quiet, take out the guard, get Ayla, and get out before anyone notices. And Cade? Cole looked at her. We deal with him after. He's not going to let this go. I know. But if we try to take him now, with all his men around, we'll lose. We get Ayla out first, regroup, and hit him when he's not expecting it. Mariki considered that, then nodded. All right, we do it your way. But if this goes wrong, it won't. It might. Cole met her eyes. Then we make sure it doesn't. They moved out at 11, a small group, Cole, Rafe, Mariki, and 3 others. They approached Redstone from the east, staying low, using the darkness and the terrain to stay hidden. The compound was quiet, most of Cade's men asleep or drinking in the main hall. The guard at the cellar door was slouched against the wall, half asleep. Cole signaled to Rafe, who moved like a ghost, slipping up behind the man and wrapping an arm around his throat. The guard struggled for a second, then went limp. Rafe lowered him to the ground, and Marieke stepped forward with the keys they'd lifted from his belt. She unlocked the door, and Cole descended into the cellar alone. Ayla was waiting, already on her feet, hands free. She'd worked the bindings loose. When she saw him, relief flashed across her face. "Took you long enough," she said. "Traffic was bad." She almost smiled. They climbed out of the cellar together, and Marieke handed Ayla a rifle. "Good to have you back." "Good to be back." "Can you ride?" "I'll manage." They moved fast and silent, slipping out of the compound and into the desert. No alarm was raised, no shouts. For a few precious minutes, Cole let himself believe they'd actually pulled it off. Then the gunfire started. Bullets tore through the night, kicking up dirt around them, and Cole heard Cade's voice bellowing orders. They'd been spotted. The whole camp was waking up, and within seconds, the desert was crawling with Cade's men. "Run!" Mariki shouted, and they did, sprinting toward the rocks where the horses were hidden. Bullets whined past, close enough that Cole felt the heat of them, and he fired back blindly, just trying to keep the pursuers at bay. Rafe went down with a grunt, clutching his leg, and Marieke skidded to a stop. "Keep going! I've got him!" "Marika! Go!" Cole grabbed Ayla's hand, and they ran, leaving Marika and Rafe behind. It tore at him, but there was no time to argue, no time to think. They reached the horses, swung up, and rode hard into the night. Behind them, the gunfire faded, but Cole knew it was only temporary. Cade would come, and when he did, it would be with everything he had. They rode until dawn, pushing the horses to their limits, and didn't stop until they reached a narrow canyon about 20 miles north of Redstone. Cole dismounted, checked the horizon, and saw no pursuit. Yet. Ayla slid off her horse, breathing hard, and leaned against the canyon wall. Blood stained her side. She'd torn her stitches again. "You okay?" Cole asked. "Define okay." He crossed to her, pulled back her shirt, and grimaced. The wound was bleeding, but not badly. He pressed a strip of cloth against it, and she hissed in pain. "We need to keep moving," she said. "Not until you can breathe without bleeding." "Cole, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." She looked at him, and something in her expression softened. "Okay, 5 minutes." They sat together in the shadow of the canyon, and Cole tried not to think about Mariki and Rafe, about whether they'd made it out, about how many of Cade's men were already on their trail. "I'm sorry," Ayla said quietly. "For what?" "For dragging you into this, for making you leave your life behind." "You didn't make me do anything." "I know, but still." Cole looked at her, at the exhaustion in her eyes, the blood on her hands, the weight she carried like a second skin. "I don't regret it," he said. "You should." "Maybe, but I don't." She smiled faintly. "You're stubborn." "So are you." They sat in silence, and Cole let the moment stretch out, fragile and fleeting. He wanted to tell her something. What exactly? He wasn't sure. That she mattered. That somewhere along the way she'd stopped being a stranger and started being something else. Something more. But before he could find the words, the sound of hoofbeats shattered the silence. They were on their feet in an instant, rifles raised, and Cole's heart sank when he saw the riders cresting the ridge above them. Cade's men. At least a dozen of them. And at the front, Cade himself. "Well," Cade called down, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Look at this. The runaway and her pet cowboy, cornered like rats. Cole didn't respond, just kept his rifle trained on Cade. You've caused me a lot of trouble, Turner, Cade continued. I respected the hustle at first, but now you're just an inconvenience. Then leave, Cole said. Walk away, and we'll do the same. Cade laughed. You really think it's that simple? It could be. No, it couldn't. Cade's expression hardened. You humiliated me, you stole from me, and now you're going to pay for it. He raised his hand, and his men leveled their rifles. Cole's mind raced. They were outgunned, outmanned, and out of options. If they tried to fight, they'd be dead in seconds. If they tried to run, they'd be shot in the back. There was no way out. And then Ayla stepped forward. Wait, she said. Cade's hand paused. What? Let him go. What? I'll come with you. No fight, no resistance. Just let him go. Ayla, no. Cole started. She ignored him. That's the deal, Cade. You get what you want. He walks away. Cade tilted his head, considering. And why would I do that? Because killing him doesn't get you anything. But letting him go? That shows you're in control, that you're merciful. Cade smiled slowly. Merciful. I like that. Ayla, don't do this, Cole said, grabbing her arm. She turned to him, and her eyes were steady, resolute. It's the only way. No, it's not. Yes, it is. She touched his face just for a second. Thank you for everything. Ayla? She pulled away and started walking toward Cade. Cole's vision blurred, and something in his chest cracked wide open. He couldn't let her do this, couldn't let her walk into that. But before he could move, before he could say anything, a new sound cut through the air. Gunfire. Not from Cade's men. From the ridge behind them. Cole spun and saw them. Mariki and Rafe, along with what looked like half the camp, pouring over the ridge and opening fire on Cade's men. The ambush was perfect, brutal, and Cade's men scattered, shouting and scrambling for cover. Ayla, move! Cole shouted, and she ran back to him, ducking low as bullets flew overhead. Cade's men tried to regroup, but Marieki's people had the high ground, and within minutes the fight was over. Bodies littered the canyon floor, and the survivors were fleeing into the desert, all except Cade. He stood in the middle of the carnage, blood streaming from a wound on his shoulder, and stared at Ayla with pure hatred. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, Ayla said, raising her rifle. It is. She fired. The shot took him in the chest, and he staggered, eyes wide with shock. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but no words came, just a wet, rattling breath. Then he fell. Ayla lowered the rifle, and Cole saw her hands shaking. Murieki approached, surveying the scene with grim satisfaction. It's done. Yashua, Ayla said quietly. It's done. They stood there in the aftermath, surrounded by the wreckage of the fight, and Cole felt the weight of it settle over him like a shroud. They'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. It just felt like survival. Mariki put a hand on Ayla's shoulder. You did good. Ayla didn't respond. Come on, Mariki said gently. Let's go home. But Ayla didn't move. She just stood there, staring at Cade's body, and Cole saw something in her eyes that made his chest ache. Regret, relief, exhaustion. All of it mixed together. He stepped up beside her. You okay? She shook her head. No. Yeah, me neither. They stood there together, and after a long moment, Ayla leaned into him, just slightly. Cole wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and she didn't pull away. Let's go, she said finally. Where? Anywhere but here. They walked back to the horses together, and as they rode away from the canyon, Cole looked back once. The bodies were already being picked over by buzzards, and the desert was already reclaiming what was left. It was over. But the cost was written in blood and ash, and Cole knew it would be a long time before either of them forgot it. They returned to the camp 2 days later, and the reception was muted. People were glad they were alive, glad Cade was dead, but there was no celebration. Too many had been lost. Too much had been sacrificed. Murieka called a gathering that night, and the whole camp turned out. She stood by the fire, her face worn but resolute, and addressed the crowd. "Cade is dead," she said simply. "His hold on Redstone is broken. The people he terrorized are free." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. "But this didn't come without cost," Mariki continued. "We lost friends, family, people who deserved better than what this world gave them." Silence. "So we honor them, we remember them, and we make sure their sacrifice meant something." She raised a cup and the rest of the camp followed suit. "To the fallen," Mariek said. "To the fallen," the camp echoed. They drank, and the fire burned bright against the darkness. Later, when the crowd had dispersed and the camp had settled into uneasy sleep, Cole found Ayla sitting by the fire alone. He sat down beside her, and for a long time neither of them spoke. "You thinking about leaving?" Ayla asked finally. Cole looked at her. "What?" "The camp, this life. You didn't sign up for this." "Neither did you." "Yeah, but I don't have anywhere else to go." "You think I do?" She met his eyes. "Don't you?" Cole thought about the cabin, the desert, the 20 years he'd spent convincing himself that being alone was the same as being free. "No," he said quietly. "I don't." Ayla looked away and he saw the conflict in her face, the part of her that wanted to believe him, and the part that was too scared to. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I'd understand if you wanted to go back." "I know." "Then why are you still here?" Cole reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, and he wrapped both of his around them, trying to warm them. "Because I'm not done yet," he said. "Done with what?" "Figuring out what comes next." She looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. Not quite hope, but close. "And what if what comes next is hard?" she asked. "Then we deal with it. What if it's dangerous? We deal with that too. What if—" "Ayla." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." She stared at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw the walls come down. Not all the way, but enough. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay." They sat by the fire as the night deepened, and Cole felt something settle in his chest, something quiet and solid and real. He didn't know what the future held, didn't know if they'd find peace or just more trouble. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't facing it alone. And that was enough. The days after Cade's death moved slow and strange, like wading through water. The camp tried to return to normal. Patrols resumed, repairs were made, meals were cooked and eaten. But there was a hollowness to it all, a collective exhale that never quite became a breath. Cole helped where he could. He mended fences, hauled water, worked alongside people whose names he was still learning. Nobody asked him why he stayed. Maybe they didn't need to. He was there. And that was answer enough. But at night, when the work was done and the fires burned low, he found himself sitting alone more often than not, staring out at the darkness beyond the camp's edge and wondering what he was supposed to do now. He'd spent 20 years running from his past and then weeks running towards something he couldn't name. Now that the running had stopped, he felt unmoored, adrift. Ayla was different. She moved through the camp like someone trying to remember how to belong, helping Mariki with logistics, sparring with Rafe in the mornings, sitting with the younger ones and teaching them how to field strip a rifle. She was present, but there was a distance in her eyes, like part of her was still standing in that canyon, staring down at Cade's body. Cole wanted to talk to her, wanted to ask if she was okay, if she regretted what had happened, if she felt the same strange emptiness he did. But every time he got close, the words tangled in his throat, and he ended up saying nothing. It was Marieka who finally cornered him. She found him one evening at the edge of camp, sitting on a flat rock and watching the sun bleed out across the horizon. She didn't ask permission, just sat down beside him and handed him a cup of something that smelled like burnt cedar and tasted worse. "What is this?" Cole asked, grimacing. "Medicine. Drink it." "For what?" "Whatever's eating you." Cole took another sip, decided it wasn't worth the fight, and set the cup down. "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." "Yeah, I've been told." Marique was quiet for a moment, staring out at the same view. "You thinking about leaving?" "No." "You sure?" Cole nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure. Then what's the problem? He didn't answer right away. How did you explain the feeling of standing on the edge of something new and not knowing if you were supposed to step forward or turn back? How did you put words to the weight of realizing that everything you thought you wanted, the quiet, the solitude, the simplicity, wasn't enough anymore? I don't know what I'm doing here, he said finally. Nobody does. That's not helpful. Marika smiled faintly. You want helpful or you want honest? Honest. Honest is you're scared. You spent 20 years convincing yourself you didn't need anyone, and now you've got a camp full of people who've decided you're one of them. And you've got Ayla, who looks at you like you're the first person who didn't treat her like a weapon or a burden. That's terrifying. I get it. Cole looked at her. You always this blunt? Only when people need it. He laughed, short and tired. Yeah, I guess I did. So what are you going to do about it? About what? About her. Cole's chest tightened. I don't know. Yes, you do. You're just too stubborn to admit it. What if I'm wrong? What if I mess it up? Then you mess it up and you deal with it. That's how this works. That's a hell of a pep talk. I'm not here to hold your hand, Turner. I'm here to tell you to stop wasting time. She stood, brushed dirt off her pants. Ayla's been through more than most people could survive. She doesn't need someone who's going to tiptoe around her. She needs someone who's going to show up, consistently, honestly. Can you do that? Cole thought about it, then he nodded. Yeah, I can. Good. Then stop sitting out here feeling sorry for yourself and go talk to her. She walked away, and Cole sat there for a few more minutes, letting her words sink in. Then he stood, drained the rest of the terrible medicine in one gulp, and went to find Ayla. He found her at the training yard alone, working through a series of drills with a practice blade. She moved with precision, each strike clean and controlled, but there was a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. Cole watched from the edge of the yard, waiting until she finished a sequence before stepping forward. You're favoring your left side, he said. Ayla turned, breathing hard, sweat streaking her face. Didn't know you were watching. Wasn't trying to hide. She lowered the blade, wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. What do you want, Cole? To talk. About what? About you. About us. About whatever the hell this is. She stiffened. There is no us. Bullshit. Excuse me? Cole crossed the yard, stopped a few feet from her. You heard me. We've been dancing around this since the canyon, and I'm tired of pretending it doesn't exist. There's nothing to pretend about. Then why do you look at me like that? Like what? Like you're scared I'm going to disappear. Ayla's jaw tightened. I'm not scared. Yeah, you are, and so am I. But that doesn't mean we ignore it. Cole, I'm not leaving, Ayla. I'm not running. I'm here and I'm staying, and you need to decide if that's something you can handle or not. She stared at him, and he saw the conflict in her eyes, the part of her that wanted to let him in, and the part that was too used to loss to risk it. What if you change your mind? She asked quietly. I won't. You don't know that. Yeah, I do. How? Cole took a step closer. Because for the first time in 20 years, I'm not running away from something. I'm running toward it, toward you. Ayla's breath hitched, and for a second he thought she might push him away, but she didn't. She just stood there looking at him like she was trying to decide if he was real. I don't know how to do this, she said finally. Do what? This. Trust someone. Let someone in. I've spent my whole life keeping people at a distance because it was safer that way. And how's that working out for you? She laughed, bitter, broken. Not great. Then try something different. What if I mess it up? Then we mess it up together. Ayla looked at him, and something in her expression cracked. Not all the way, but enough. Okay, she said softly. Okay? Yeah, okay. Cole reached out, slow and careful, and took her hand. She didn't pull away, just laced her fingers through his and held on. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not giving up on me. Never. They stood there in the fading light, and for the first time the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt like something else, something that might, someday, turn into peace. The weeks that followed were easier. Not perfect. Nothing ever was. But easier. Cole and Ayla fell into a rhythm, working side by side during the day and sitting together by the fire at night. They didn't talk about the future much, didn't make promises they weren't sure they could keep, but they were there, present, and that was enough. Marieka noticed, of course. She didn't say anything, but Cole caught her watching them sometimes, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. One evening, she pulled Cole aside while Ayla was helping with the evening meal. "You're good for her," Marieke said. "You think?" "I know. I've known Ayla since she was a kid. I've never seen her like this." "Like what?" "Settled. Like she's not waiting for the other shoe to drop." Cole thought about that. "She still is, though. Waiting. I can see it. Give it time. She's spent her whole life running. It's going to take a while for her to realize she doesn't have to anymore." "And what if she decides she wants to? Run, I mean." Marieke looked at him. "Then you decide if you're going with her or letting her go. That's not much of a choice. It's the only choice that matters." Before Cole could respond, Rafe jogged over, his face tight with urgency. "Marieke, we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Riders, coming from the south, a lot of them." Marike's expression hardened. "Cade's people? Don't know, but they're not friendly." The camp mobilized fast. Within minutes, everyone who could hold a weapon was armed and positioned along the perimeter. Cole grabbed his rifle and found Ayla already on the wall, scanning the horizon. "What do you think?" he asked. "Could be anyone, could be trouble. When is it not trouble?" She smiled grimly. "Fair point." The riders appeared a few minutes later, a group of about 20, moving slow and deliberate. At the front was a woman Cole didn't recognize, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face carved from stone. Marieke stepped forward, rifle in hand. "That's far enough." The woman reined in her horse, studied Marieke for a long moment, then dismounted. "I'm looking for someone." "Who?" "A woman named Ayla." Cole felt Ayla tense beside him. "Why?" Marieke asked. "Because I have a message for her, from her people." Ayla stepped forward, and the woman's eyes locked onto her. "Ayla? Who are you?" "My name is Kira. I'm from the eastern camps, your camp." Ayla's face went pale. "What do you want?" "To bring you home." Silence. "I don't have a home," Ayla said finally. "You do. You always did. We've been looking for you for months, ever since word spread that you were alive. Why?" Kira's expression softened. "Because we need you. Because the camp is falling apart without you. That's not my problem. It is if you care about the people you left behind." Ayla flinched, and Cole saw the pain flash across her face. "I didn't leave them. I was taken." "I know, and we spent years thinking you were dead, but now you're not. And the camp, your people, they need someone to lead them, someone they can trust." "I'm not a leader." "You're more of a leader than you think." Ayla shook her head. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I don't belong there anymore." Kira stepped closer. "You belong wherever you choose to belong. And those people, the ones who raised you, who fought beside you, who mourned you, they're still waiting, still hoping." Ayla looked at Cole, and he saw the question in her eyes. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "I don't know." "Then take your time. Figure it out." "And if I decide to go?" Cole felt something twist in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Then I'll support you." "Even if it means leaving this? Leaving you?" He reached out, touched her face. "Especially then." Tears welled in her eyes, and she turned away, breathing hard. Kira waited, patient, and after a long moment, Ayla spoke. "I need time to think." "Take all the time you need. We'll be camped a few miles south. When you're ready, come find us." Kira mounted her horse and rode off, her people following, and the camp slowly returned to normal. But Cole knew nothing was normal. Not anymore. That night, Ayla didn't come to the fire. Cole found her sitting alone on the edge of camp, staring out at the darkness. He sat down beside her, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. "You're going to go," he said finally. I don't know. Yeah, you do. She looked at him, and her eyes were wet. I don't want to. But you need to. Why? Because you've been running your whole life, and this is your chance to stop, to go back and face the people you left behind, to build something that lasts. What if I fail? Then you fail. But at least you tried. Ayla was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Come with me. Cole's heart stopped. What? Come with me. To the camp. Help me do this. Ayla, I can't do it alone, Cole. I need you. He stared at her, and 1,000 thoughts crashed through his mind. The cabin, the desert, the life he'd built and abandoned, and the woman sitting beside him, asking him to walk into the unknown. Okay, he said. Okay? Yeah, I'll come. Relief flooded her face, and she threw her arms around him, holding on like she was afraid he'd disappear. Cole held her back, and for the first time, he felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty, not peace, but something close. Hope. They left 3 days later. Mariki offered to send people with them, but Ayla refused. This is something I need to do myself, she said. Marika nodded, understanding. You come back if you need us. I will. Rafe pulled Cole aside before they left. You take care of her. I will. And you take care of yourself. She's strong, but she's not invincible. Neither are you. I know, but Rafe clapped him on the shoulder. Good luck, Turner. They rode south, following the trail Kira's people had left, and reached the camp 2 days later. It was smaller than Mariek's, maybe 100 people, and it had the worn, ragged look of a place that had been through hard times. People stopped and stared as Ayla rode in, and Cole saw the recognition dawn on their faces. Some smiled, some cried, some just stood there, like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. An older man stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. Ayla? She dismounted, and the man pulled her into a fierce hug. We thought you were gone. I was, but I'm back now. The man pulled back, looked at Cole. Who's this? Cole Turner. He's with me. The man nodded, accepting that without question. Welcome. Over the next few weeks, Cole watched Ayla transform. She was still guarded, still careful, but there was a lightness to her now, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. She listened to the camp's problems, mediated disputes, organized patrols, and slowly, piece by piece, she started to rebuild what had been broken. And Cole stayed beside her, helping where he could, learning the rhythms of a life he'd never imagined for himself. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, setbacks, moments when Ayla doubted herself so much she wanted to quit. But Cole was there, steady and constant, reminding her that she didn't have to do it alone. One night, 6 months after they'd arrived, Ayla found Cole sitting by the fire, carving a piece of wood. What are you making? She asked. Not sure yet. Something useful, hopefully. She sat down beside him, and for a while they just watched the fire. I never thanked you, she said finally. For what? For staying. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Cole set the wood down and looked at her. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. He took her hand, laced his fingers through hers. Okay, you're welcome. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there in the quiet, and Cole realized something. This was home. Not the cabin, not the desert, not the solitude he'd clung to for 20 years. This, her, the life they were building together. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was theirs. And that was enough. The seasons turned and the camp grew stronger. People who'd been scattered and broken found their way back, and under Ayla's leadership, they built something that lasted. Walls went up, fields were planted, children were born. Life continued, messy and imperfect and beautiful. Cole and Ayla never married. There was no ceremony, no formal vow. But they built a small cabin on the edge of camp, and they filled it with the things that mattered. Books, tools, memories, each other. Some nights, when the camp was quiet and the stars hung low, Ayla would ask Cole if he ever missed the desert. Sometimes, he'd say, but not the way I used to. What changed? I did. And it was true. The man who'd pulled her from the sand all those months ago, the one who'd spent 20 years running from his past, was gone. In his place was someone different, someone who'd learned that running wasn't the same as being free, that solitude wasn't the same as peace, that the hardest thing in the world was letting someone in. But it was also the only thing that mattered. Ayla understood that better than anyone. She'd spent her life surviving, and survival had taught her to trust no one, to keep moving, to never let her guard down. But Cole had shown her something different. He'd shown her that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stop running, stop fighting, stop protecting yourself from the very thing you needed most. Connection. It wasn't perfect. They still fought, still struggled, still carried the scars of everything they'd been through. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. One evening, nearly a year after they'd arrived, Ayla stood on the ridge overlooking the camp, watching the sunset. Cole found her there, as he often did, and stood beside her. "You thinking about leaving?" he asked, only half joking. She smiled. "No, just thinking." "About what?" "About how strange it is, to finally feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be." Cole wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him. "Yeah, I know what you mean." They stood there as the light faded and the first stars appeared, and for the first time in either of their lives, the future didn't feel like something to run from. It felt like something to build. And so they did. They built a life that wasn't defined by what they'd survived, but by what they'd chosen. They built a home that wasn't a place, but a person. They built something that couldn't be taken or broken or burned down. They built each other. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered, because the world was harsh, and the desert was unforgiving, and life had a way of taking everything you loved and grinding it into dust. But if you were lucky, if you were brave enough to stop running, to let someone in, to choose connection over safety, you could find something stronger than solitude. You could find home, not in a place, not in a past, but in the person standing beside you, holding your hand, refusing to let go. Years later, when people asked Ayla how she'd built the camp into what it became, she always said the same thing: "I didn't do it alone." And when they asked Cole why he'd stayed, why he'd given up his quiet life in the desert for the chaos and uncertainty of the camp, he'd smile and say, "Because I found something worth staying for." They never said each other's names. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. The story of the woman who'd been left to die in the desert and the man who'd refused to leave her became legend in the camp. Parents told it to their children. Elders recounted it around fires. And with each telling, the details shifted, grew, became something larger than life. But the truth, the real truth, was simpler than any story. Two people, broken by the world, had found each other in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. And they'd decided to stay. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because they'd learned the hardest lesson life had to offer: that surviving alone was possible, but living, really living, required something more. It required trust, vulnerability, the willingness to be seen, to be known, to let someone else carry part of the weight. It required choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And so they did. Through the good days and the bad, through the fights and the reconciliations, through the moments of doubt and the moments of grace, they chose each other. And that choice, small and quiet and utterly unremarkable, became the foundation of everything that followed. The camp thrived. The people flourished. And somewhere in the middle of it all, two people who'd spent their lives running finally stopped. Not because they'd reached the end, but because they'd found the beginning. A beginning built on choice, not necessity. On love, not survival. On the quiet, radical belief that even in a world defined by loss and hardship and endless horizon, you could create something that lasted. You could create home. And when the wind came, as it always did, rolling across the flats with teeth and fury, they stood together, side by side, and let it pass. Because they'd learned something the desert couldn't teach and the storm couldn't break. They'd learned that the strongest thing in the world wasn't walls or weapons or distance. It was the choice to stay. And they made that choice every single day for the rest of their lives.